I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to episode number 73 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Super excited to welcome Jeffrey Henning to the podcast today. Now, Jeffrey has long been an important entrepreneur in the market research space. Way back in 1993, he brought web survey software to market research when he co-founded a company called the Perseus Development Corporation. Later in 2006, he brought enterprise feedback management to the space with a company he co-founded called Volvisi. And in 2012, he started a company called Researchscape International, where he continues to this day as Chief Research Officer. Now, of course, if you've been in this industry any length of time, you've probably also seen him speak at a conference or be involved in an industry association, or maybe you've read a paper or two of his. But one thing that a lot of people don't know about Jeffrey is that he has long been a board game enthusiast. In fact, he's actually created and published his own game, which I believe is out of print currently. Is that right, Jeffrey?
I got a couple.
Okay. All right. We'll talk it now. I've always been a huge board game guy myself, a big D&D geek from way back. So I'm super excited to talk about all that and research and more on today's podcast. So welcome to the show, Jeffrey.
Thanks. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you. All right, well, let's we got lots to talk about, a lot of cool things, but let's start with research. You know, it's always interesting to find out how people got into this space in the first place. So what's your story there?
So I was a teenage market researcher, and when I meet other people who were teenage market researchers, it's usually because their mom or dad ran a research firm. In my case, I worked at a temp agency, and this market research firm needed help setting up this database on DOS called Data Ease. They had done this competitive intel of automotive patents, and they were trying to build this database. And so they called me for what was supposed to be a weekend's worth of work, or it was supposed to be like a 4 hours bit of work. And I had to learn this database package. And so I ended up working over the weekend to get it done so they could deliver it on Monday. And then they offered me a summer job, and I fell in love with the industry, doing competitive research, custom research, survey research. And so after college, so I worked for them through college, and then after college, I worked for them.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. So usually when I hear that story, it's like, yeah, I took a job as a phone interviewer, but you dug right into the tech side. So tell us about how things unfolded then after college.
Yeah, so back then, I mean, people were just starting to use desktop publishing software. Like my first presentation, probably, I did the analysis in Lotus 1-2-3,
Yeah,
slides in Harvard Graphics.
old school.
I wrote anything, it was in WordPerfect. And one of our clients was very they did payphones. The phone should go and put your nickel into, and they were very concerned about competitive payphones. They weren't concerned at all about cell phones, even though cell phones were out. They were very concerned about competitive payphones. And so we built this system where we mined their database and gave them beautiful, desktop published maps on a Mac showing their market share by region. And then I got asked to do a survey. It was an Inc. 500 company, so they were just growing too quickly. So they kept giving me projects that they had no business giving me. I was a finance major, and they're like, "Yeah, we got to do this survey. Here, go write it." Well, who's it for? It's for Apple. It's about their laser writer. At the time, their printer was their most powerful computer. So they're like, "Here, go read a bunch of questionnaires we've written and write this questionnaire." And so my very first survey research project was for Apple computer. I got to go to Apple and present, so it was just fascinating to sort of take what the business goals were, figure out how to ask them of respondents, and then how to turn that back into something useful to the business. And so back then we did a lot of face-to-face interviews, which was just phenomenal because you'd get the feedback of a bad questionnaire.
Absolutely.
So you have a chance to refine the questionnaire that you wrote, and so it was just a great experience. And I realized that there wasn't a lot of software. There weren't a lot of software solutions just for it that were on PCs. They were on mini computers and mainframes.
Right.
And so we built some software for focus groups and for face-to-face interviews. And then when the web came along, pivoted and did that. And so my boss and I started a company, which was Perseus. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And you did that for quite some time. So tell us about kind of how that unfolded. So you went from, hey, we built something, we started a company, and then you're running a company, and then you've done it again a couple times. So
Well, yeah. Well, the first one was, I mean, so from 93 to 99, it was three of us. I mean, we were not very successful. We mainly we funded the software development through professional services. And then we won the PC Magazine Editor's Choice Award by 1 point. And then sales, took off. When we sold software in boxes, you could literally go into, Egghead at the back of a Staples and buy software. So that was really when the business took off, and we became an Inc. 500 company, which had kind of been my goal. And then we were getting pulled up market by our clients and that's really how we started to come up with enterprise feedback management. So Bovisi, we sold the company outright to venture capitalists, then reinvested in the new company, which was formed from Perseus, Web Surveyor, and Surveyo. And so it really was a continuation of what I'd been doing before, but just more focused on the enterprise.
Okay. And what does Researchscape International focus on then? What are you doing?
We focus on newsmaker surveys, so surveys for PR firms, for content management, so for content marketing, for news releases. So, and we also have software called Research Story, which takes data from Alchemer, Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey, Forsta, and automates a lot of those aspects of building a deck. So all the things I would have done manually, we've automated.
Ah, okay, okay, interesting, super cool. All right, so let's talk board games. So what ignited that interest way back when, and tell us about the game that you developed.
Yeah, so I mean, so my grandparents, they on both sides, had tough childhoods, grew up during the Great Depression, and a deck of cards was a prized possession, and so they taught us lots of card games.
Sure.
And then when we'd go over to my cousins were into Risk and Payday and Stratego, my older cousin. And so for me, games were always a chance to, celebrate with family. And then my friends, you and I talked about this game. So there was a series of games.
Yeah, Axis and Allies.
Yes, this is Axis and Allies by Game Master, which was a Milton Bradley sub-brand. So they had like 4 big games. And so when I was in junior high and high school, we played Axis and Allies and Shogun and Broadsides and Boarding Parties and Fortress America, which were their big games. And so, and of course we played Dungeons and Dragons and miniatures. And so, at some point we wrote our own rules for Axis and Allies. We wrote our own rules for miniature war games. And so it was just always something that I had done with friends, was to create different games. And so I pitched one of my games to a company called Nestor Games.
Okay.
And they crowdfunded it and published it. It's called City Blocks. They've now changed their business model, so they now have only 6 or 8 games. So it's out of print. You could play it online at a site called Yukata.de. So they have a website where you play with other people, sort of over time. So you can play it there. And then when I looked at it, in a lot of games, it's a weird industry in that Monopoly is still the #1 game. Despite how old it is.
Yeah.
A lot of other games come and go. A lot of other games are gone or out of print, just like my game. So I decided that complicated games were harder to print. So I wanted to do a card game. So I did a card game called Civscape. Civ like civilization, scape. Apparently, I like scape as a word since Researchscape's my company name. But it's you and I have talked about Flux.
Yep.
Flux is a great series of games, if you're not familiar with it, where basically the rules change. The game starts draw 1, play 1, but there can be a new rule where now you're drawing 2, or a rule where you're playing 3. And they've branched out into IP. So now there's like a Doctor Who Flux and Star Trek.
Yep. SpongeBob Flux.
Probably. And
There is. I
oh,
have it.
there is.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, I did not know that. And so my game Civscape is kind of like if so that's Andrew Looney, great guy who wrote those games. If he had created a little civilization game, the rules are all on the cards, and it's about having a Mediterranean city state and trying to build it before your competitors build it. So
Cool. I love it. Civscape.
yeah.
So, do you have another game on the horizon, or?
So so I have a website called Troy Press where I self-publish because as I realized a lot of these games don't last very long. And my most popular game is a little print and play game called Spin Rummy. So it's 18 cards, and the cards are unusual in that they have basically you can rotate them. So on one side it's the king of diamonds, and on the other side it's the five of hearts. And you're trying to build rummy hands. And so it's a print and play game. You can just print it out on cardboard. It's 18 cards. And so that's one of my simpler games.
Super cool. Yeah, that's really neat. I'm definitely going to check out a couple of these games. I'm also going to check you out on BoardGameGeek.com. See what the see what the board game community says about your games too. So it's a really interesting. For some reason it doesn't seem terribly surprising that somebody who works in research would be interested in developing board games. Is there any sort of commonality there? Any similar thread that you found? Or are they just two separate spheres?
I mean, for me, it's my relaxation, so it is pretty separate. I mean, I have done a lot looking at. I mean, it is pretty different. I've been interested in concept testing games, so there's not a lot of market research in the gaming industry. So the things that we've done have typically been because I wanted to do them, for example, projects and things like that. Yeah.
Sure. Have you thought about it the other way? I mean, are there elements of gaming that you have applied to sort of the gamification of research?
Yeah, actually, my favorite presentation that to give, I gave at the New England MRA, so now part of the Insights Association, their New England chapter, and it was on gamification, and so which a lot of people think, oh, geez, I got to build some virtual world, Second Life, or metaverse thing, and really, it's more just applying techniques from games. I mean, if you think about people taking your surveys. 70% of them, according to Lucid, are taking them on their phone this year.
Oh wow!
So what else are they doing on their phone? Mobile games. The mobile games have turned us all into gamers. I mean, if you go on an airplane, you'll see people of all ages playing their games on their phone while they wait. And so we're competing with that. And so different things like brand awareness. Instead of saying, "Hey, what brands of software can you name?" How many brands of software can you name in 30 seconds, and having a timer and then giving them a score. Oh, you named more brands than 60% of people. So there's little gamification techniques that you can do. We've done a number of things with quizzes to kind of give people some feedback. We had a brutally long survey it was a survey of a customer base, much longer than I like to write. And it was internet, and so they were like, geez, how do we keep people's attention? We know this is a long questionnaire, and so we added something in the middle, which was basically asking them some questions about Wi-Fi, and then we gave them a Wi-Fi IQ score. And because these were their customers, no one's Wi-Fi IQ was under 100.
Yeah.
So we gave so we gave them scores and then tips on, hey, if you want to improve Wi-Fi reception in your house, here are some things that you can do. And so that was a way to kind of get people engaged to stay with the survey. So realizing that your surveys are competing with games, I think, is good to keep in mind.
Cool. All right. So you've long been kind of at the forefront of the research space and even driving it to some extent. So as we sit here today, what does the future look like for research from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I think data analytics is subsuming us in some ways. I mean, uh, there's so many sources now of behavioral data.
Mhm.
And I mean, it used to be, I've done a lot of work in the software space, and it used to be, you would do surveys to figure out what to build in the next big release. So back when it was the waterfall method, and then people moved to an agile method. So you're doing research to figure out, okay, what are we going to do in the next 6-week sprint?
Right.
And then it got to the point where you were deploying features to parts of your customer base, not all of your customer base, because then you
Right.
were going to test them. So all of a sudden now you're using the application or your website to get A/B tests and to understand things. It's certainly with online stores, there's all of this behavioral information that you're capturing. Now, interestingly, a lot of times people say, well, okay, well, if we're doing that, we don't need to ask people anything. One of the biggest companies that has that behavioral data is Facebook, and they're also one of the top survey researchers.
Yeah.
They're constantly fielding surveys. So when you can marry the survey with the behavioral data, I think you get much, much richer. But I'm like fascinated by Duolingo because they've been pretty
Yeah.
transparent about their A/B tests that they do.
Yeah.
My wife and I are both learning Italian. Our apps look completely different. I mean, completely different. She's got
Oh,
different
interesting.
character, the way, I mean, um, I've seen different features roll out in the year I've been using it. And basically they test everything from when to send you a reminder message to what the wording of the reminder message is.
Yeah.
So all these different things that they're doing to basically build, obviously to keep you coming back, to keep learning the language, but then also to assess, well, how good are you at learning the language? And so
Yeah.
they are doing a tremendous amount of market research on their customer base that isn't what we traditionally think of as market research.
Yeah. I love the example. I'm a Duolingo user myself, and the guilt factor that they use, they probably tested, you made Duo sad. You
Yeah,
don't do it for a couple of days, it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to make Duo sad.
yeah.
Too funny. Awesome. Cool. All right. So your time is limited, right? But we all consume media. You mentioned games, but we all consume media as well. So curious to know what media you turn to either for inspiration or enjoyment or insight.
Yeah, so I used to be so when Twitter first came out, I was a big user of Twitter, and that was probably, my favorite social media site. I don't really do anything on Facebook. If you've ever used the MRX hashtag on
Yes, I was
Twitter.
going to ask you about that. I thought I heard one time that you started the hashtag MRX.
So MRX so originally when people tweeted on Twitter, they would hashtag things MR.
Right.
So, but there was but there was also a lot of people who would tweet celebrities that started with Mr. And so there's all kinds of garbage in it.
Yeah.
And so I actually did an analysis of, the different hashtags, and MRX was just being used by this Morristown, Tennessee weather station. Like this bot, it was like their 3-digit code from the National Weather that was reporting their weather. And I'm like, well, no
You can
one's using
take them over.
MRX. We can be market research excellence. The X can stand for whatever you want,
Yeah.
next generation. Yeah, so I had a declaration of independence from the MR hashtag, started MRX, and then other people began to use it. So Twitter was my go-to for a long time.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I had a note to ask you about that and I had forgotten about it. So when I post this, of course, I will hashtag MRX. It'll be, just a circular reference.
Yeah, and I should thank Annie Pettit and
Yeah.
Ray Pointer. They were early. They also promoted it to their followings, and I'm sure there were some other folks too to start using it, because the other channel was pretty full of spam.
Yeah.
So, but I still am on. I actually have 4 Twitter accounts. So I have got my Jay Henning one, which was the one I did MRX on, and I still do market research stuff on. I obviously have our corporate one, Researchscape. I have one where I tweet in Esperanto. That's what I'm learning on Duolingo besides Italian.
Oh,
And then I have my board game one, which is completely different. So J. Allen Henning on Twitter is where I talk about RPGs and board games. But and so I do get inspiration from those, and I also really like Reddit and Discord. So
Okay. Yeah.
so Reddit, I really value Reddit. I usually on Reddit once a day, and there's a good Discord RPG community. So
Okay.
I run I typically run a it depends. We're kind of taking a break during the summer, but for the summer, I was running 2 separate RPG groups, basically every other week, running one or the other. And so right now, I'm running one called Stone Top, which is it was just kickstarted last year, and then I'll also run Dungeon World, which is a different RPG. So
cool, excellent. All right, well, this is all well and good, Jeffrey, but this is the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, so we need to infuse a little bit of rock and roll to this conversation. Although don't let me don't let me color your answers, because they are what they are, whether it's rock and roll or not. But what I really want to know is, let's say you're stranded on a desert island, right? And you have 3 records at your disposal to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they?
Yeah, interestingly, because I'm gonna give you some old ones, but these are not ones that I grew up with liking this much, but I like them a lot. So the oldest one would be Abbey Road. I absolutely love Abbey Road.
Classic.
The medley in the back, and people don't realize, like, the end is the last song they ever recorded together. It's the only song with a Ringo Starr drum solo. So I adore Abbey Road. And so that would definitely be one. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Oh yes, classic. Classic.
And then when I bought I bought a new car, and it was like 2006, 2007. It was like right before everybody was shifting to the online MP3 players, and so it was a CD. It was like one of the last cars you buy with a CD player.
That's the same. I've got the same.
Yeah, and American Idiot came out, and I literally put it in my CD player. When there was not a CD changer; it was a CD player that took one. Put it in CD, and I did not take it out for 13 months. I love American Idiot.
Nice. Well, I'm a huge punk rock fan, so Green Day mention, of course, makes me very happy. So great choices there, Jeffrey. Usually I end there, but I'm not going to let you off the hook yet, because we do have a mutual appreciation here for board games, and so we're gonna double this question up, because I just want to know. I'm super curious. So again, stranded on a desert island, you've got your records, you're listening to your Green Day and all that good stuff, and you have 3 games at your disposal, 3 board games. What are they?
So probably the one that maybe will be better known to folks is called Seven Wonders.
Seven Wonders. Okay.
What's fascinating about it is, if you've ever played Sushi Go,
I have.
You basically, every player has a hand of 7 cards to start with, to build your civilization. I really like civilization games. And you're going to pick one from your hand, put it face down, and then pass your cards. And so then everyone's going to play a card. So with like 7 people, you're not like waiting. You constantly have something to think about and do. And it's got very interesting scoring. So I've played this game, I think, probably 50 or so times. It's just a great game with a big group. Really holds up. I've been playing it since it came out, which I think was shortly after Movisi was founded, because I remember playing it with some coworkers.
Cool.
And then probably the lesser known one, that they did do a Kickstarter and redo it, is called Clash of Cultures.
Okay.
And so this is another Civ game. All these games are Civ games, I just realized. So civilization games. And this one, basically, you've got a dynamic board. So there are licensed Sid Meier's Civilization board games. When I've played this with friends who love Sid Meier's Civ, they're like, this is actually a better Sid Meier's Civ game than the licensed board games. So you've got this random exploration of the world, and you've got this tech tree. So your society is learning new things over time, mastering the alphabet, figuring out how to sail. So really good. And
Cool.
then this is more of a future Civ one, which is called New Frontiers.
Frontiers.
It's the Race for the Galaxy board game, which is a classic card game. And you're exploring you're exploring a galaxy, you're drawing planets from this bag, trying to decide which planets you're going to settle. Also highly replayable, lots of different strategies. So when I thought about it, each of those games are games I've played a lot, and I'm happy to like if you said, hey, let's play it right now, I'd happily play any one of them. Right? I mean, they're very replayable, very deep games.
Super cool. Excellent. Well, I love that. You've given me some good games to do some research on. Always looking for good ones to play with my kids who are, 12, 13 now. And yeah, you're giving me some good stuff to think about. So plus I've just learned a whole lot about you that I never knew before. So it's been a really fun conversation. So I look forward to seeing you sometime soon at a conference or something similar, but let's stay in touch regardless. So thanks so much, Jeffrey, and stay in touch. Rock and roll.